Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We're in 1 Peter chapter 2, finishing verse 22. But before we begin, Jeremiah 15:16, Thy words were found, and I did eat them. And thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, as we saw in the first part of verse 22, he says, who did no sin. And we saw last lesson that how God himself is not a sinner. Jesus Christ did no sin, and he suffered unjustly. He knew no sin. He never committed sin in action and in word or in his mind at all, and therefore he came to this earth to identify with us in our sin, to die for us, to save us from our sin, and that we could have a home with him forevermore in heaven. And yet he committed no sin, and yet he bore our sin, the punishment for our sin. And he did it unjustly because he didn't deserve that, all right? He didn't deserve the punishment himself, but he took our punishment upon him. So he says here, who did no sin. And we also saw how mankind today has a very hard time understanding how a holy and righteous and pure God can still maintain his holiness and his righteousness and his purity when all of this is going on where? In his creation. Right? All of this, God, you created the heavens and the earth, right? Well, why, if you were truly a loving and kind and good God, why is there so much death and hatred and anger and wars and diseases and all these tornadoes and all this stuff going on here on the earth? If God, if you truly were who you say you are, then why is all of this happening on your creation? All right? Well, that's the accusation that's usually leveled against God. And the answer is fairly simple. I heard the answer many years ago. Never forgot it. And the answer is this. God did create the heavens and the earth. That's true. But when he created them holy and righteous. He created them without sin. They were pure. All right? The reason why there's sin in the earth, the reason why there's death and war and hatred and famine and diseases and earthquakes and all this stuff isn't because of God. It's because of us. It's our problem. You have to understand that. It is our problem. God created a pure heaven and earth. We are the ones. Who? I said we. We are the ones who messed this up. It's not God. Stop accusing God of causing all this mess. It's not his problem. It's our problem. We made this mess. We were the ones who rebelled against God, and because of that, it's because of our decisions. Whose? Our decisions. That's the reason why we have sin and death and sickness and heartaches and all this stuff, famines and stuff. It's not God. Stop accusing God of all these problems. God didn't make the wars. God didn't make the famine. God didn't make death. No, the problem is ours. And the love of God toward mankind is revealed in that he himself left heaven and came to what? Earth. He came into our situation, into our mess that we created. God, a holy and righteous and pure God, came into our mess, into our heartaches, into this world that we messed up in order to save us from it. That's why God didn't make this world this way. We did. Stop in your intellectual huffy puffiness and trying to accuse God of all. Stop it. If this is our problem, we made this mess. And God, because of his love, came into our mess. He came into our sewer to dwell among us and to show us a way out. And that way out is by faith in his Son. Faith in Jesus Christ. Faith in his blood that he shed on the cross for us. It's by faith we apply what God did for us to save us from this mess that we made. Not God. God didn't make this mess. We made this mess. We're the ones who rebelled against God and caused this mess of what? Of his creation. When he created it, it was pure. Who messed it up? God? No. We did. It's our mess. God came into our mess to save us from it. Getting sick and tired of people accusing God of all the wars and all the famine. God didn't do it. We did it. It's our problem. We did this. And God, through his unmeasurable love, decided to still love us through all this mess and come down to earth in the form of Jesus Christ to live among us and to die on the cross, that if we believe upon the Lord Jesus Christ, what? We shall be saved. We shall be saved out of this mess. And God has a plan. God has a plan. You can read it in the book of Revelation, how God is going to end this. You can also read it in 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 9 and 10 and 11. If you want, you can go to my teachings on 2 Peter 3, verses 10 and 11, how God is going to take this world, this heaven and this earth, which we made a mess of. Who? Again, I'm saying, we made this mess. God created the heavens and the earth. He created it pure and holy and without sin. Yes, he did. But we came in and we messed it up. And God is going to take our mess and he's going to set it on fire and he's going to purge it and he's going to cleanse it from sin and he's going to make a whole new heaven and a new earth. And you can be a part of that. It's through faith in Jesus Christ, through faith in his blood shed for us. And that if we put our faith and trust in what Jesus Christ did for us, the Bible says that God will impute to you his righteousness. And God will see you as holy and as righteous as his Son is. That when you die, you'll go and have a home forevermore in heaven with him. And so God, yes, who did no sin. God did no sin. He is holy. He is righteous. He is pure. And he still is in heaven. And just because you're on this earth, in this mess, in this sewer, in this cesspool of sin and rebellion and wars and famines, just because you're here in this existence does not mean that God is a sinner. Just because you are doesn't mean he is. Just because you made this mess doesn't mean you can accuse God of making this mess. He didn't. We did. It's our problem. God's given us an opportunity. Every single human being, God's given them an opportunity to be saved from this mess that we made. All right? So he says here, who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. And this Greek word for guile is doulos. And it's the same Greek word we saw back in chapter 2, verse 1. He says, wherefore, laying aside all malice and all guile. Okay? And it means a snare. It means deceit. It means to catch something with bait. All right? So, not once did Jesus ever lie or use trickery or deceit with any person. Not once. He didn't tell a little white lie. He didn't tell a little funny joke about somebody or some people or whatever. He didn't lie or deceive anybody with any of his words. Not one time. In Mark chapter 12, and in verse 13, it says, and they sent unto him certain of the Pharisees and of the Herodians. Why? Why did they send the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus? What? To catch him in his words. They wanted him to slip in his words, to sin with his words, okay? And then in Luke 11, verse 53 and verse 54, it says, and as he said these things unto him, the scribes and the Pharisees began to urge him vehemently and to provoke him to speak of many things. So here's the scribes and the Pharisees. As they heard Jesus speaking, they began to urge him increasingly, vehemently, to provoke him to speak many things. They wanted him to speak about a lot of things. Why is that? Well, verse 54 says, laying wait for him and seeking to what? To catch something out of his mouth that they might accuse him. They wanted him, they were trying to entice Jesus to keep speaking because they realized that if he kept speaking, he's eventually going to sin. Well, that's true from a human viewpoint. From human viewpoint, that's true. And this is why in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, we are to let our words on earth be few. Why does God tell us to let our words on earth be few? Because with human beings, not with God, with human beings, the more we speak, the more we have an opportunity to sin with our mouth. Come on, you know it's true. You know it's true. The more loquacious we get, the more we speak, the more our mouth rambles on, the much better opportunity we have of sinning, of saying something that's just not right, right? A little joke, a little dig here of somebody's life, right? Say something, a jealous statement. The more we speak, and that's exactly what the scribes and Pharisees were trying to do with Jesus. We know if we just get him to speak more, just keep on speaking, Jesus. Keep asking him questions. Eventually he's going to sin. Well, that's true with mankind because we have a sinful nature. That is true with us, but it's not true with God. Okay? He never, there was no guile found in his mouth. He never spoke a sin. Never sinned with his mouth. Never sinned in his mind. Nope, never did. All right? So he says, who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. And you know, I'm going to stop here and I want to start verse 23 next lesson. But it's so true with us. It's so important as Christians that we, if you are kind of a loquacious person, you love to speak, you love to ramble on, and maybe you laugh about it because you do, and you joke about it, and people know you are, and that you are a person who talks a lot. Understand something, that the more we speak, the much more possibility, I shouldn't say possibility, the much more surety we have of sinning with our tongue. All right? And this is why God encourages us to let your words be few. Be careful what you speak. Don't be so free with your words, okay? You don't have to always have an opinion about something. You can have an opinion in your mind, but don't always be so ready to speak it out. All right. Be careful. Put a gate on your mouth and watch what you're about to say, and think about what you're going to say before you say it. Because am I going to sin with my tongue here in a minute? Am I going to be sinning with my mouth with what I'm going to say? Is it really just right, or am I just throwing out my opinions? And yet, use Christ as the example that he never sinned with his mouth. And Can I ever get to that? Probably no, I'll never get to that. But I know I can tremendously reduce the amount of times that I sin with my mouth if I what? If I obey Ecclesiastes 5, 1 and 2, right? If I let my words be few on this earth, because I know that God is in heaven and I'm upon the earth, and God is going to hold us accountable for every idle word that we say. All right? Until next lesson, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.